How would you describe to an individual what Tantra is?
In a nutshell, for me, Tantra is how to be okay with life as it is. It fundamentally says that every part of the human experience is divine. And if we were to really believe that and embody that, then what would that mean? It would mean we wouldn't resist our human experience and we wouldn't attach to our human experience. So in the taxi drive here, there's roadblocks, there's ceremonies. I'm going to be late. We're going to have to cancel the podcast. I've got to trust because this is happening. So resisting it is ridiculous because I'm stuck in a car and cannot do anything about it. Those kind of choices, moment to moment, day to day, to actually really trust the flow of life. And what that requires is a deep safety within ourselves to actually be able to let go and actually trust ourselves and how we're going to show up for ourselves in the inevitable highs and lows and ups and downs of life.
Welcome to the Heart of Man podcast, a podcast for any man seeking to live in alignment with his deepest core and lead a life of profound meaning and connection. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and I'm here to empower you through transformative conversations, eye-opening insights, and practical wisdom. Join me now as we venture into the heart of man. Let's dive in. Tara Meegan is the creative director and a lead teacher with Embodied Awakening Academy, a globally recognized Tantra school leading over 20,000 students worldwide in the realms of emotional, relational, and sexual mastery. For almost a decade, Tara has been devoted to living the philosophy of Tantra in every aspect of her life, passionately sharing this knowledge alongside her lived experiences. Now, you may be wondering, what is Tantra and why is it valuable? Before I offer my own take on it, I want to acknowledge that I asked myself this very same question when I was first exposed to Tantra over 2 years ago. At the time, I was seeking deeper resolution in my own emotional, relational, and sexual life, and it was my very first introductory workshop where I met Tara. This ultimately propelled me into a deep journey over the past years into this field of work. As I see it, you may consider Tantra as a philosophy or a way of living that embraces every aspect of the human experience and seeks to create harmonious relationship with it. This includes areas where we may hold deep shame, fear, and insecurities, but also our deepest desires, needs, and longings. I can confidently say that this philosophy has provided me with many valuable insights, among other things, and I was excited to bring Tara on board, who's now become a dear friend and someone I deeply respect in this field. I've always admired Tara's devotion to this path and the way she embodies the feminine principle. And while I do see differences in our work, I honor them as complementary, serving a similar purpose. In this conversation, Tara and I dive into what Tantra means to her and explore some of the core tenets that are particularly predominant in the Embodied Awakening Academy. From there, we discuss some of the difficulties that Tara observes among the male clients she serves, offering an in-depth roadmap for connecting with ourselves emotionally and cultivating resilience. Additionally, she shares some great insights on relationships and sexuality towards the end of our conversation, insights that I've greatly benefited from and that have served me well in my own life. Now, without further ado, let's dive into the show with Tara. Welcome back, everybody, to yet another episode at the Heart of Man. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and I'm incredibly excited to have a very dear friend with me today. She's a musician. She's the creative director and the lead teacher / tantric practitioner of Embodied Awakening. She's dedicated to living Tantra in every aspect of the human experience. She passionately shares her lived experiences with others, with her embodied virtues for safety, for compassion, for grace, and grounded presence. Tara Meegan, I welcome you to Heart of Man.
Thank you. That was a beautiful introduction.
This feels like a really special moment. I realized that the first message I sent you after my first Fundamentals of Tantra with you was in August 2 years ago. So It's ultimately been a 2-year journey that we've been on. And I just want to say that Tara has greatly supported me on my path in terms of really stepping into deeper, I'm going to say, leadership and as well competence in the realms of relationship and sexuality, but as well, I'm going to say emotional resilience. So you have a very dear place in my heart. And I'm incredibly excited as well to have another woman on the podcast. I've had a few so far, but the only one that's been published so far is with Carolina. And that one has been greatly received because just receiving that feminine perspective in terms of like the challenges that you may see among men and the things that you would like men to know about ultimately the experience around relationships and sexuality is so valuable. And I can see that there's great value in terms of us going into the tantric teachings, which I haven't gone into so much within this podcast. So where I'd like to begin is I would like just to give you a bit of a moment here to share with all our listeners, for someone who is not aware of Tantra or the tantric path, how would you describe to an individual what Tantra is?
Mm-hmm. So in a nutshell, for me, Tantra is how to be okay with life as it is. So it fundamentally says that every part of the human experience is divine. And if we were to really believe that and embody that, then what would that mean? It would mean like we wouldn't resist our human experience and we wouldn't attach to our human experience. So in the taxi drive here, I'm like, there's roadblocks, there's ceremonies, there's like, I'm going to be late. We're going to have to cancel the podcast. And I just I've got to trust because this is happening. So resisting it is ridiculous because I'm stuck in a car and cannot do anything about it. So it's those kind of choices, moment to moment, day to day, to actually really trust the flow of life. And what that requires is a deep safety within ourselves to actually be able to surrender and let go and really actually trust ourselves and how we're going to show up for ourselves in the inevitable highs and lows and ups and downs of life.
Yeah, that already gives us, some things to work with. And I definitely want to come back to the safety piece. But before I do, I would like to just have the listeners an opportunity for you to really share your experience of how you got into Tantra and as well what made this path so meaningful to you in terms of like committing pretty much your entire life to it.
Yeah, I mean, I just was sick of suffering in relationship. I'd had a 10-year marriage, and when that ended, I realized that I had an emotional body that I had suppressed for 10 years, but I was disconnected from my emotional and sexual body and stayed way too long in a relationship that wasn't compatible. And then my second marriage was an improvement, but there was just this arguing, and like women really are from Venus and men are from Mars, and that was showing up in our lives. And I'd kind of been searching for I think it was around 15 to 18 years at that time, living in India on and off for 10 years, studying with different teachers, different spiritual modalities. And when I first entered Chantel Raven's space, who I run the Embodied Awakening Academy with now, I was just like, why wasn't I taught this at schools? Like, this is what we need to know, is what's going on with our sexuality, the differences between men and women, what our needs are and how different they are. And it just made sense to me. And I have a very scientific mind with a degree in marine ecology and statistics, and I did honors and I did PhD. So I have that mindset where I need it to be logical. And for me, Tantra is just very logical, like it makes sense. And then there's the mystical realms, and I can connect to them as well and see more from like a quantum physics perspective how it all works. But I just find mysticism beautiful. So I love that merging of that with Tantra. And then when I started to see it having effect on my relationship, I was like, okay, this is great. I'm going to invest more time in. But where it really got me is I saw the ripple effects of Tantra on every part of my life. I had alcoholism. I was addicted to painkillers for 17 years. I was on antidepressants. I had chronic pain for 4 years and was working with like tremendous amounts of pain in my body from a workplace injury. So, and stress. I was like constantly stressed and into like work addiction. And when I saw it impact that, and especially the chronic pain after 4 years of working with Western Australia's top, like everything, neuroscientists, pain psychologists, chiros, you name it, and it didn't fix it. And then when I worked with Tantra and started to enter the retreat spaces and receive one-on-one sessions and do the trainings, it was clearing pain and tension, not just in my physical body, but in my emotional body that I'd held on for like a few decades. And that was really the eye-opener for me, that gave me the ability to jump off that cliff into the unknown and resign from my job without knowing what I was going to do, to then have a dream a few nights longer that I was going to be running the academy with Raven, and phoned her up and was like, I don't know how this is going to work because I can't use a computer. What do you reckon? And her response was, well, that came to me really clearly in a meditation a month ago. And I trust that inner guidance that I get in meditation. And I don't know how it's going to happen, but let's start doing sessions together. And within 2 months, I was at a computer creating the Embodied Awakening Academy with her.
There's something incredibly relatable in what you said in terms of like you ultimately being done with struggling in the realms of relationships. And I recall the reason why I got into that first Tantra workshop with you as well is I just got out of this relationship where I was like, I don't know how the fuck I like to navigate and lead this realm of my life. I've never learned how to do it, whether it was in the emotional realm, the relational realm, the sexual realm. And then all these difficulties would emerge, and then I didn't have the skills, I didn't have the competencies to really work with it. And also what I've always loved and admired about the tantric path, which I would like to just bring in as my own experience. And you kind of mentioned, that like Tantra guides us into an understanding that everything about our experience is divine, or like okay as it is. And it ultimately teaches us to really work with it. And that was incredibly liberating to a part of me that has cultivated such a depth of internalized shame around, this is good, this is bad, this is wrong, this is right, and ultimately it led to such a depth of suppression and repression around various different elements, whether it's, my emotions, because men are not supposed to feel, right? Or as well, the repression of my sexuality, because it didn't feel safe ultimately to go there, because, I didn't trust myself to ultimately wield that part of my life. And then outside of that, just how to navigate the relational realm in terms of the, the woundings that can kind of occur from our like initial caregivers. So there's a lot of complexity in that. And it's beautiful just to hear as well the depth of transformation that you've really had the chance to go through Tantra. Outside of that, I would like to as well expand a little bit on this understanding of these two pillars that you guys extensively focus on in this work, which is inner union and sacred union.
Great. That's where I was going. So perfect alignment. Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me with Tantra was when I saw it impacting my relationship. It's because through Tantra, I became connected to the relationship with myself in such a deep way that I was like, as I was processing and using the tools, I was constantly shocked at how much I beat myself up, around how much negativity there was, around the abandonment wound from my father still coming up after like 15 years of psychology and counseling. And it started to shift these and addiction, and why I was like, what was actually beneath the addiction, and actually healing that. And it kept pointing back to self and kept pointing back to self. And that is the first pillar of Tantra, is we're always going from the state of, can we take the emphasis off the external and bring it onto the internal and look at what's going on in here? And yes, that can go into shadow. And that's what I did in my first 10-year marriage, being the good spiritual woman, meditating 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the night, and then bypassing my emotional body to connect to spirit. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about actually when we're connected to ourselves and we're not resisting what's coming up, whether it's a traffic jam or I'm feeling angry or I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling scared, when we cease to resist the sensations in our body and the experience that we're having linked to some type of trigger or emotion, then we can actually get beneath that to what that part is telling us. And it makes me so sad that this isn't taught in schools, because our emotional body is what differentiates us as human beings. And it's the greatest tool and the greatest access point that we have to our evolution, because our emotions are telling us something is out of alignment in our life. If we're just suppressing and ignoring that, then we're not actually listening to what our souls and our hearts are like. Hey, you're not that, you're this. You're not your conditioning. You're not the beliefs of your parents or your society or media. Come back to the truth of who you are. And for me, that's been the most valuable gift I could ever give myself and ever share with others, because the way that we're experiencing life and the way that we feel in our being is then the lens of perception through which we experience the outer world. And we got it all wrong. We're going, you're the problem. I need to set boundaries so that you won't hurt me, so that I'll be safe. I don't want to open my heart because of blah, 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 whatever it is. Or I need you, otherwise I'm not going to feel X, Y, and Z. And it's just constant drama and conflict of the mind and the ego trying to create supposed safety, actually, is what we're all looking for and longing for beneath it all. And it ain't out there, it's in here. And every great spiritual tradition in some way kind of points to that.
The place where I'd like to move forward with is I want to hear a little bit more about, first of all, what would be like a step-by-step process in order to really establish that inner union, specifically if we have, let's say, entrained ourselves towards that disconnection from self and focusing more on the external, as you said, pointing fingers, you, all of that, right? And I'm also, like a second part to this question is, I'm curious to hear what are some of the challenges that you specifically see among the men that you as well work with?
Sure. So the way to do it is just to get educated. And for me, Tantra is being the best form of education for me, because our education is primarily around, especially around sexuality, is pornography and religion.
Yep.
And then when it comes to relationships, we learn from transmission as human beings, especially as children. So it's our parents and then their parents and their parents, so hence ancestral trauma that we're also playing out. So that gets to stop if we actually feel what our parents couldn't feel and what their parents couldn't feel. I guess the starting point is to stop distracting yourself from your emotions. And that's a pattern that, I'm 46 and I've been doing this full time for 9 years, and then spirituality 15 years before that. And it's still such an inbred pattern to resist pain. So now it might come up like 15% of the time. It used to be like close to 100% of the time. So it's to have that willpower and that inner ability that when your emotions are there, instead of going for the phone, instead of going for the drink, instead of going for food, instead of going to work or whatever it is that floats your boat to distract yourself, it's just to take some time out for yourself and to breathe into that and be like, I feel fucking angry right now. Or I feel really, really sad right now. Or, oh God, I'm scared. There's a lot of fear in my body right now, whether it's around money, relationships, sexuality, purpose, whatever it is. And then to feel that and actually give that part expression like we used to do as children, until we were shut down at some stage and it didn't feel safe to express our emotional body. And I'm not saying you express that onto someone, because that's what we're doing, because we're not expressing it on a pillow. And then you let it out and then you give it complete freedom to, pillow beating, crying, hand screaming, really going into that primal release from the body and from the nervous system, where all of that stuck energy lives and is just waiting to be felt. It is not going anywhere, which is why in our lives we get triggered by stuff, because it's triggering the current situation, yes, but it's also triggering the past experiences where we weren't met with love and there was some challenge that we then suppressed. So really that first step into inner union is to be there for yourself And this is where the masculine and feminine comes in within a union, which is that within us, we each have masculine and feminine energy, which is not gender-based, and it is regardless of whether you're in a male body or a female body. But we have that. This is duality. And when we can hold masculine presence for whatever emotion is arising, then one, we can hold space for ourselves and whatever's coming up, no matter what's going on in the external, and that is safety. And then secondly, as women, we become a bit less of a pain in the ass for our partners because we're not outsourcing our safety, saying, hey, you hold my emotional body because I don't want to feel my pain. And that was the biggest lesson for me in relationship, was seeing the way that I was doing that. And I see it in all of my clients and all of my students. And yeah, when we can do that and just hold presence for whatever's there, then the feminine energy or the yin energy, the emotional, the feeling body, can fully express and release and not stay stuck as dis-ease in the body. And then that's for men as well, that their feminine also needs to be held by their own inner masculine, so that you can actually communicate your needs and communicate your boundaries and say, hey, I don't want to be spoken to like that. Can you speak to me with kindness or whatever it is?
I'd like to take a moment just to backtrack and just to emphasize as well the importance of what you communicated around just education and really bringing, I guess I'm going to say, a new context to one's own experience. Because usually, if we don't have an understanding of how to navigate our experience, we'll default away to our habitual ways that ultimately we, as you said, that we have picked up from childhood, ultimately from our parents, of how they ultimately did things, right? And usually there's going to be some form of unmet parental needs that we then start to project out onto our partners. And I saw that ultimately very deeply coming into my life when I noticed that all these qualities for like love, nurturing, sensitivity, ultimately those were the qualities I was deeply yearning for in my partners, because there was such an absence, or I'm going to say neglect, of that in my own life. And simultaneously, what I often observed is that there's often that demand from my partners for, I'm going to say, like that safety piece that you mentioned. So I think there is something incredibly illuminating in terms of what you said, of how when we speak to these dynamics of masculine and feminine, these energetics that are living in both of us, if they're not integrated within us, that we'll ultimately outsource that exact expression from our partners that we don't ultimately have integrated yet.
If I can just add one thing, because I think this really gets missed in the inner union piece. It's absolutely the foundation and the starting point. Because when we're not holding that in ourselves, then we're expecting another person to do so, right? And it is normal and very human and very important and necessary that we're going to have needs from our partner still, around safety, around communication, around, all the things that make us human. And what I see in a lot of the work that's out there is it's like, no, I've got to completely 100% self-resource and be sovereign and be two independent people together. It's like, the beauty of it is that when we're holding ourselves actually, and we're feeling our anger and feeling our sadness, and we're not projecting that onto our partner, then underneath that we get to the gold, which is something's out of alignment. And what is that? Is it a need that I need to give myself, or is there something that I'm needing from my partner? And just getting honest with that and not head fucking ourselves with, oh, does that mean that I'm going codependent? Does that mean that I'm avoidant? Does that mean, and it's like, just feel what's there. When you release your stress response, that's the key. You can't trust yourself when you're in a stress response. Absolutely. But when you actually spend the time to release that from the body and the nervous system and get to the vulnerability and just get honest with what you're needing, then you go to your partner and you can say, hey, this is what I'm really loving and would really love and need in our relationship. And then you get to test compatibility.
Yep.
And that's what creates safety and expansion of love. And also, if you're not compatible, it's what shows that really clearly. So you're not spending months, years, decades in a relationship that isn't compatible because you're too afraid to lose love.
Yeah, I really appreciate that context. And a framework that has really supported me. I wonder, have you ever read the book Intimate Communion by David Deida?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it speaks to ultimately what it is that you're communicating. I feel like he has an incredible framework that kind of discusses the relational evolution, which is from ultimately codependence, independence, and then interdependence, which is ultimately what you communicated, right? Codependence would be ultimately that we're outsourcing that very thing that we don't, recognize in ourselves from our partners, which creates ultimately this kind of very dysfunctional element. And an evolution to that would be ultimately the integration of that very quality that we are seeking out from our partners. And then the final stage would ultimately be this understanding of, okay, I got myself, I can hold myself. And I think the caveat here is that the very thing that we're not bringing to our partners, unless that's like directly communicated or consciously communicated, is our triggered self, right? Yeah. And that projected self. We can still bring particular needs, but we're not, doing it ultimately from that reactive place. And then,
which essentially is an avoidance of pain. If you're speaking when you're triggered, it's because you don't want to feel.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel like there's so many pieces
okay,
we're untangling. So I want to kind of like create a bit of a concise map for everyone who's listening in. So I want to backtrack a little bit. I want to get into the conversation around masculine and feminine and bring a bit more of a concise understanding to it. First of all, I want to understand, what do you see as the difficulties with your male clients in terms of creating, I'm going to say, emotional safety for themselves? Where are their blockages and how do you support them in their process?
So there's many things, but the first thing that really sticks out is access to their anger.
Tell me why anger is so valuable or important for.
I think it's the energy that connects us to our power. Right. And if you haven't befriended your anger, then you can't really be in your full expression of power. Why? Because anger tells us where a boundary's being crossed or a need isn't being met that's really important. So if we're not feeling our anger, then we're keeping silent and we're kind of swallowing it down and being the good boy or the good girl, essentially. And there's and there's a reason for that. And that is because anger, when it goes into shadow and is expressed unhealthily, becomes violence, right? Becomes abuse. And so there's a shaming of that energy. And a lot of that is with the masculine as well. And so what I feel in a lot of men is this like almost feeling unsafe to express that, especially if they've had not good role models or terrible role models of the expression of anger. And that's then linked to their dark masculine, which every woman loves in the bedroom. It's like, I want to be claimed. I want to be ravished. I want to be able to surrender. But that energy is again so suppressed in men because in shadow, it's that claiming, ravishing is the rapist and is the murderer. So it's more challenging for men to own that because of that history and because of that kind of collective guilt and shame. So yeah, I feel like connection to anger for every human being is key, because when you can take your anger to a mat and let it rip. I won't use words. I've destroyed people on cushions. I've ripped open people's hearts and chests and then eaten their heart. Like, I've gone pretty feral with it. But that is in us. And so why not access that and just give it expression rather than it coming out when we've had a few drinks or we're finally like at the end of our tether and then it kind of explodes or it comes out in manipulative ways. Actually release that pressure valve and see what the unmet need is or see what the boundary is. And from that point of inner clarity where there's no trigger, it's just like you stop putting up with the shit and you stop putting up with mistreatment. And so in relationship with women, we like being guided by your consciousness. We like having boundaries set when we're being irrational and we're being unreasonable. And by unreasonable, I mean when we're projecting our anger, our unprocessed emotional body onto you. And a woman who is conscious, who is the best type of woman to be in relationship with will actually be able to receive that. And maybe not straight away, but be able to go, fuck, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm going to look at that. The unconscious women are going to like, then jump. So there's your red flag. So owning your anger, communicating your needs and boundaries, again, tests the compatibility of the relationship.
I appreciate all that. And when I was listening to you, I was reflecting on the importance of anger. And I see how anger in many ways is an access point, especially for a lot of the men that I work with, when they have been so disconnected or numbed out from their bodies. To some degree, I have the sense that they really have to go into that, I'm going to say, overexpression through the anger to ultimately connect or access the more tender aspects. I kind of like the thought that anger is in many ways like this bodyguard for like sadness and hurt. And so I see often that on the other side of like deep expression of anger, that's when the tenderness and the vulnerability comes, because, you know, it does feel more powerful to go into anger, right?
Yeah. And one thing that I think is important for men is it's like working out at the gym and punching bags is so good because they're getting that like, that primal aggression out, but it's only the top layer.
Yeah.
The other layer is exactly what you said, where you actually by yourself on a cushion, feel your anger, let the words out, and then be able to drop to the vulnerability that's beneath that, and then hold the sadness, the grief, the fear, whatever is beneath that as well. Because it doesn't feel good to have boundaries crossed. It doesn't feel good to be mistreated. And when you can access that vulnerability as well, you also then get to access that little boy inside, or for me, little girl inside, that can be scared and shaky because of how they weren't listened to or attuned to at childhood. So you actually get to go back, and this is going a bit deep, but you actually get to go back to childhood through the little child inside and just go, what are you needing? And then you be that for yourself. So then you become your own best father, your own best mother, your own best beloved, your own best friend. And this is inner union. And this is wholeness. And this is how we recapitulate past traumatic experiences where the nervous system actually shifts because you're going back in time and the mind doesn't know the difference when you're in the feeling emotional body. And you can clear that from your being so that then you can start to reparent yourself and actually feel what you need in partnership, in friendship, in business relationship, and just share that authentically with someone.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think what I would like to as well emphasize for all the men listening in is just the value ultimately that actually comes from doing such work, because particularly in the relational, and I'm going to say sexual realm, this is where the greatest dysfunction occurs when we're incredibly disconnected, whether it, ultimately leads to, sexual dysfunction, with our genitals, but ultimately as well, within the depth of the connection, there's always going to be a cap because ultimately we're protecting ourselves, from expressing what's really there. And generally what I've observed with all the women that I was with is there's a sixth sense, so they can feel that there's something going on in me, but I wasn't willing to own it. And I guess the thing that I've had to really come into terms with is how incredibly unsafe that makes my partner, how incredibly untrustable that makes me with my partner. And that ultimately as well creates deeper disconnection as well in her, in my dynamic with her. And then as well, it even perpetuates even more of like the repression and the suppression of self ultimately. And so I think that's the thing I just really want to emphasize as well. Hey, it's Alex here. Before we dive back into a conversation, I'd like to share something that's very close to my heart, which is my one-to-one coaching. I've had the great privilege of working with individuals from diverse backgrounds, all seeking to deepen their connection with themselves, embody deeper confidence, thrive in their relationships. Through this work, I've had the great honor to support my clients through incredible transformations. Among other things, they gain deeper clarity, resilience, and strong connections, both personally and professionally. Here's what some of them had to say about our work.
I was able to fully reconnect with myself, which enabled me to fully reconnect with my partner. All of a sudden, I was having discussions that I had feared, that I had avoided for years. I started leaning into conflict. I felt more empowered.
And I was just blown away by how skilled he was as a guide, as a coach. He really met me where I was at.
Thank you, Alex, for this amazing time. You changed my life, and it's so crazy what's possible in such a short time.
Don't think twice. Sign up, take the leap to join him at any of his courses and programs. You will not be disappointed, and you will come out a new, incredible, evolved version of you, and it's going to be amazing.
I feel more confident, more grounded, and in control of my emotions.
If somebody is actually looking to join it, I would say it's a no-brainer.
It was just a beautiful and magical experience, and therefore I'm going to work with him in the future for sure. And when you seek change in your life, when you seek more happiness and freedom in your life, then you definitely should start with Alex.
As you can see, people from all corners of the world have experienced profound changes. And while I'm constantly evolving in my work, my one-to-one coaching remains my favorite offer. The intimacy, dedication, and transformation that's present within this container is undeniable. At the time of releasing this episode, I have just 2 slots available for my one-to-one coaching. If you feel called to take the next step, don't hesitate to reach out. You can find a link to my website, shoot me an email, or DM me on Instagram, and you'll find all the details in the show notes below. Now, a quick disclaimer. Availability might have changed by the time you hear this, but my encouragement is to not let it hold you back. Reach out, and I'd be glad to explore how I can support you on your journey. Without further ado, let's get back to our conversation.
Yeah, and I think if I'm to be completely honest, from a woman's perspective, if a man isn't in touch with his feminine, there's a lack of absence to a certain depth of your being. Just like if I'm not accessing my masculine, or if I'm too much in my masculine and not accessing my feminine, there's a lack of depth in me that is also stops the deepening of a relationship. So when a man is in touch with his emotional body through the feminine is the feeling body, the emotions, the vulnerability, which can be a tougher journey because you've got to feel everything that hasn't felt safe to feel before. And when you do that, then it creates deeper intimacy, not just with your beloved, but with yourself, with people around you, makes you relatable, makes people be able to feel you.
Yep.
And that's what we all want, is to be able to really feel each other and drop into that depth.
Yeah. I would like to bring a little bit more awareness to this dance between masculine and feminine and how it as well shows up in our expression with ourselves. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways of how we could talk about it, but like to really keep it very simple, I like this idea that the feminine is ultimately expression or like energy, and ultimately it's really when we go through the feminine path, let's say, it's really about intensifying, amplifying, and as well connecting to that part of us that can be expressive, that can ultimately amplify as well energy. So that's kind of like the way I see it. Whereas the masculine path is really a lot about presence, containment, and really as well about finding that element of stillness among all the chaos that may be happening around us. So I guess the thing I want to just refine a little bit, I want to hear, where do you see kind of that balance between feeling our feelings, but also not getting lost in that? Because I see that is only like part of the journey. Like there is going to be moments where we do have to actually override our feelings for a particular moment, whether it's we have a deadline or, our children, like our baby is crying at 2 a.m. What are we going to do? Like there is going to be moments in life where there is that requirement for overriding our feelings and to not get lost in that. But simultaneously that, I see that the underexpression or the overexpression of one of those can get quite dangerous. So I want to hear a little bit more about how can we walk that very integrative path between both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a huge part of feeling the feelings and the feminine is a massive paradigm shift for men and women, but I think men, because they're more connected to the masculine, is to be connected to the feminine means to trust your body and to trust your feelings and your intuition. So essentially, it's this paradigm shift of living life through trusting the mind and doing everything through the mind, which is the analysis, the risk assessment, the understanding, the interpretation, which is all relevant. but it is so on steroids throughout our society. It's why mental health is so massive across the planet. And we've been educated that from a very young age. Our mind starts getting penetrated at 5 years of age, if not younger, when we still haven't connected fully to our emotional body. It's insanity. So really the journey of coming into the feminine and why it's so important is we're trusting actually our body's responses to situations rather than overriding it with the mind. Which means when we're making decisions about whether we want to go this path or when we want to go this path, the mind's going to go, oh, but if you do this, you'll be able to make more money, and then you'll do this, and then you'll get better, and then you'll like fix this and that. And it comes up with really good ideas and decision points, arguments. But the body can be going, oh, that just feels too much. But we're so conditioned to override it that we don't listen to it. So the reason that the feminine takes us into the body and less from the mind and listening and trusting ourselves is because it's connected to the emotions. It's connected to staying in the body and being with our experience and being with our sensation rather than thinking about it.
Yep.
And it's a deep one. I've been working hard on that. And in the last kind of 7 months, it's after consistently just like bringing it back in, trusting it feels, oh, can I really trust this? It's actually so much more easier living life from trusting the wisdom of our body and what we're feeling than the mind, because it's us. Our mind isn't us. Our mind is largely based on our conditioning and our programming from others. Whereas our body, if we're not in a stress response, is always going to be guiding us back to ourselves, connection to soul, and to stay in alignment. And so that feels uncomfortable because it's so unfamiliar, because we've spent our whole lives doing the opposite and leading our lives from our mind. And the quickest way to get there is to have a daily practice where you sit and you feel what's going on. And through time and practice, that actually the little child inside and the emotional body will start to feel safe to express. But if there's not that safety because you've abandoned yourself for the majority of your adult life through distractions, avoidance, addiction, suppression, then the emotions aren't going to feel safe to come out. So when I work with men, a lot of the time is me just like supporting them to hold space for their emotions until finally they feel safe to express.
Yeah, that's one piece that I really want to emphasize. I guess just the value as well of working with, let's say, a practitioner or a therapist, but also, you know, having maybe a good group of men, you know, ultimately in men's work and men's circles where we ultimately get to bring our emotions, and we have men who around us who have ultimately done the work to integrate and really are able to lead themselves more emotionally, so they can as well in that moment ultimately guide and support us in finding a way to lead ourselves more. Because I found as well that when I didn't know how to like do all these practices and how to really lead myself emotionally, I noticed that a lot of impulsive and reactive decisions were made. And I see that it actually creates a lot of fear ultimately, which for me, my journey has really been about learning to trust my own body and learning to really trust what was coming through, because I noticed that I was making such impulsive decisions sometimes through my feelings that I didn't trust my feelings. So yeah, to maybe just close that loop on that, how can we create that deeper trust when ultimately we have lost that trust in our own emotional body?
Yeah, I think what you said is really worth speaking into, which is to have support from someone.
Yeah.
So I had Chantel Raven, and she's my go-to, and I haven't actually found other practitioners who can hold space to the depth that she can for me to feel everything that's there. And it's really about choosing someone who you feel safe with and who you would want their life. So I think really it's finding a practitioner you can work with that can hold that space because they're living kind of that expanded version of what you're wanting for yourself. When you're feeling that, like, you're feeling that trigger inside the body, whether it's anger, sadness, fear, that you sit with it. You take yourself to your bedroom, public toilet, wherever you are. This is what I do now. I don't like holding anything in. I'll just go release it. And you bring in your masculine presence and you breathe into your body. You can place your hands on your body if you like, and you feel where that is in your body. Where's the tension point? And then you just hold presence for it. You witness it without judgment. You don't try to fix it, change it, analyze it, make sense of it. You just hold presence, right? And that creates safety. And then the second part is you bring in the feminine, which is to validate your experience. It's always fair enough. I'm feeling shame right now. That's fair enough. I'm feeling angry right now. That's also fair enough. Whatever you're feeling is fair enough, especially given whatever your childhood conditioning was and your experiences in your life. And then with compassion, you just send that part love. And that's the thing, is we've spent a lifetime, first of all, with our parents and our society shaming our emotions. So all we've done is the same, men and women, and we just keep judging ourselves for feeling a certain way. So the way to repattern that is to do this, hold presence for it. Don't try and fix it. Don't try and change it. And then just validate it. Yeah, it's fair enough I feel this way. And that validation is key. It's what let goes of the resistance. And then when love and presence in there, that is the foundation for healing. That's all I'm doing in workshop spaces and retreats. It's all I'm doing when I'm holding one-on-one clients, is creating a really strong field of loving presence for whatever is showing up in that person. And that's why people consistently say, I felt so safe, so I could feel all this stuff. Well, guess what? You can do that for yourself by just doing that practice. And once you've got that part that's shaky in some way, then you breathe into that with this container that you're holding for yourself, and you just give it expression. You give it breath, you give it sound, and you give it movement. And the sound is key. With every exhale, you're releasing whatever the emotion is.
I love as well just kind of the methodology, or kind of the system that you just brought here, because I can really see how that's supportive, and I very much bring that in my own work. And just this idea of like, okay, the part of us that's witnessing, the part of us that can notice, all right, I'm feeling this thing, that's ultimately, according to Tantra or like these teachings, that's our masculine, right? And then and the part of us that feels, and the one that can amplify through expression, that's our feminine, right? And so here we kind of see a bit of that integration coming through, and just see as well that foundational piece around safety and creating that safety, so emotions can actually emerge and bubble up to the surface.
I love the way that you frame that in our culture, the majority of it is actually through the masculine. It's through meditation, it's through awareness, it's through mindfulness, it's through, a lot of the work with the epic work of Joe Dispenza, which is like really using the mind to also connect to the body and believe, and positive outcome focus, which is all necessary, but it's half of the piece. Yeah. And when that can be used in conjunction with the emotional body and to allow, then you have that inner union. And that is Shiva and Shakti in the tantric tradition, which is the witnesser and the observer as Shiva, the masculine, and the experiencer and the expression, which is Shakti, the feminine. And then that's inner union. And once we have that in ourselves, outer union with the beloved becomes so much simpler.
All right, let's talk about that. I want to hear a little bit more about relationships and sexuality, and what can Tantra teach men ultimately of how to lead those realms?
Okay, let me just tune in, because there's a lot. There's two main things that come to mind. One is the difference in the wounding of the masculine and feminine.
Right.
And the second one is differences when it comes to heart and animal. So I'll quickly touch on the first one, which is, and this is generalizing because it can be either, but I would say, more of the majority of men have the enmeshment wound, which means that one or two of their parents haven't been able to hold their emotional body, And so they've put that onto the child, or the child's been in a highly like volatile, emotional, or even manipulative emotional upbringing.
That was definitely me.
Yeah, and that's so much as a child. So then you learn love isn't safe. And then you take female bodies, and what I've noticed is that the main wounding there is the abandonment wound. So in my situation, my dad left when I was 4 and then was physically and emotionally absent for the majority of my life, right? So then I've got the abandonment wound. So understanding that because we are here to evolve, whether we like it or not, we are attracted to that which is pressing and triggering our buttons, right? And I could go into a whole philosophy of why. I'm not going to. So just understanding that means that when we're in relationship with someone, we now have an understanding of what's going on. And instead of making them the enemy and ourselves a victim, we can actually have compassion for ourselves and compassion for the other person. And what that means is what we've been talking about is when that abandonment wound of wanting to like cling and grab onto the relationship and like love me and doing all the things to have to be validated, that we recognize that and we take that to our cushion and we let ourselves feel that and cry and be all dramatical about how unloved we are and will we ever be chosen? And it's fair enough, right? And then we get to the need underneath that and we can ask that, hey, I actually just need more quality time with you because one day a week is not enough for me to, to have honest communication together or whatever it is. And then the same for the enmeshment wound and that more love avoider when you feel yourself, this isn't safe and I'm retreating and all the guards are coming up, that you catch that. And that you actually take that to your cushion and you move somatically with breath, sound, and movement. Get away from me. You're not safe. Oh, leave me alone. And you run that through the body so you can get to the vulnerability beneath that and have a conversation around that.
Yeah.
So that's the first piece.
Yeah, let me just comment on that for a moment. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think it's such an essential dynamic as well for individuals to truly understand in relationship, because it will always show up, especially in those moments when we're dysregulated. Either there's one person who is going to be more avoidant or one who's going to be a bit more anxious, right? And then usually one triggers the other as well. And ultimately through this awareness, we then get to start working with them, as you said, individually. But I also see that there is separate learnings for both, right? Whereas like for the individual who's, let's say, been enmeshed in the past, their journey with an individual that feels safe is actually about leaning a little bit more into intimacy. Whereas with the individual who comes with a bit more of an anxious background, it's really about learning to
Get a life.
Yeah, I remember you always like to say that.
That was my journey.
Right. Yeah, so it's really about like ultimately becoming more self-sovereign and really as well learning to, tend to oneself, Yeah.
Absolutely. But doing that once you've actually felt the trigger as well, because then there still also may be a need that needs to be communicated. So both have to happen at the same time, giving it to yourself and then checking out if there's there may be a reason why you're feeling overwhelmed in relationship. There may be a feeling why you're feeling needy in relationship. That yes, has some to do with your attachment style, but also probably to do with a relationship, and you really want to check that out.
Would you like to get to that second piece that you want to share?
So the second piece is around polarity, and this is what we like to call the cosmic joke. So if you think of it as a woman's positive pole is her heart.
What does that mean when you say positive pole, like just for the individuals who may not understand this?
So
language?
It's her most kind of activated natural essence, right? And her negative pole is her animal. Not to say that isn't activated and open.
So her genitals.
Her genitals, yeah. Her pussy. And then it's if you think about her positive pole, it's where she shares her life force energy through the breasts, through the nurture and sustenance of a child. Whereas a man, his positive pole is his cock, his animal, and that's his penetrative energy that creates life, like through his seed, and his negative pole is his heart. So if you look at how that combines in and outside of the bedroom to open a woman's animal, her sexuality, her negative pole, you need to go through her positive pole. You need to go through her heart. And for women to open a man's heart, his negative pole, you need to go through his animal, his positive pole. So therein lies the great cosmic joke that every couple I've ever worked with in my own experience has been. The women wants, I want to feel loved, I want to feel adored, I want to feel chosen, I need more communication, I need more vulnerability. And when she receives that, she feels safe. And when she's safe, her yoni will open.
Yeah. Right? Which means vagina.
Vagina. Sanskrit word for vagina. Linga, Sanskrit word for cock. And, you know, for a man, it's like he's the hunter. And so, of course, that's the way that he does claim and ravish a woman, is through the sexuality. And so for women, it's like, can we also attune to that? Which has a lot to do with how for both parties, it becomes really how complacent do we become in terms of our activation of our eroticism within our own bodies and with our partners, or are we kind of doing the honeymoon period and then we're like, oh, okay, I'm going to go to the pajamas stage now and, you know, like not keeping it sexy. And it's fun to keep it sexy. It keeps that like passion and fire alive, which is good for both people, right? And this is the medicine of this difference in polarity. And then for women who need their hearts open, this is great for men because as we've been talking about, that requires them to be connected to their feminine and their emotional body and their feeling body. So it's the cosmic joke, but it's also the cosmic plan where it's helping both of us evolve into more wholeness so that eventually we're feeling turned on, we're feeling safe, we have a great friendship outside the bedroom, which is what translates to inside the bedroom.
Yeah, when I first came across these teachings, that was incredibly illuminating for me how those dynamics were playing out. And I noticed and I find that it was through my sexuality that was ultimately trying to access this experience of love and connection, which was unbeknownst to me. And I see that as well with a lot of men. It's not ultimately just about getting off, but ultimately there's a yearning, there's a desire to find that element of connection, which ultimately as well, I'm going to say, gave me more of an opportunity to really learn to inhabit that part of my body without actually like feeling so much shame for it as I used to have, you know, through my conditioning and growing up. So I want to hear a little bit more on how we can work with these living contradictions and how we can mutually support each other, because ultimately both need to be supported, as I see it, in their individual ways.
I mean, the first thing is just to be aware that that's what a woman needs and that's what a man needs. And, you know, it's interesting because it's quite accepted in society that, yeah, a man should like expand in his communication and really, you know, expand in that safe container together and give compliments because that's what we love and it opens us up. But it's a little bit taboo every time I speak into for women of keeping that sexual aliveness in their body and, you know, being in that, not the temptress, but the healthy temptress, really, that is still dressing beautifully and flirting and being sexy and teasing and doing sexy things.
I just noticed myself like enlivening just when you say that, right? And it's not really about having it be, as you said, so overtly sexual, but just that is like, oh, that's nourishment.
Yeah, right? and the reason that it's scary for us to do that, like I spoke about the anger with the masculine, is for women, it's because they're being subjugated to a lot of sexual misuse and mistrust.
Right.
So there needs to be that taken into consideration. But once that's taken into consideration, like I got triggered when I first heard this concept. I was like a tomboy. I would dress as a boy, essentially. And then when I got more and more into Tantra, I started to understand the feminine in a new way. And actually that's what I was longing for in myself. And one of my favorite things that I own is my wardrobe, because every day I get to put on different like energies and archetypes. And I really embody, and I believe that we all are gods and goddesses walking this incredible earth. My goodness, Garden of Eden right here, right now. And so why not celebrate that, you know? And why not? And I do that for me. because then I feel fabulous, even more fabulous. And a change of outfit is like my funnest thing to do. But then I bring that to my partner as well. And then it's great. And then he compliments me and then we get a bit sexy. So it's these ways where we're kind of, where men are visually aroused creatures. And so are women. So we're bringing attention to that, our primal nature, which is very natural. And then we're also bringing awareness that we're also emotional beings. And a man's feminine also needs to be attuned to feel safe. So just remember there's both going on.
100%.
And also a woman's masculine, or let's just say a woman's sexual body, she also wants to have that sexiness from her partner, not just in the bedroom, but out of the bedroom with flirting and grabbing and lots of kissing, where there's no expectation for it to lead to sex.
Right.
And the more that you do that, then the more aroused and open she's going to be in the bedroom.
Yeah, I like to see it as like be more invitational and enticing versus too direct about that. Like sometimes that can be really supportive, but sometimes that can be a little bit actually more jarring, and actually it needs more safety and openness. Not sure if you agree with that, but just want to as well underline the point that you mentioned around like for us as men, really, I'm going to say integrating this part in our sexuality and really doing our work so we can actually be safe in ultimately our expression of sexual energy. So there is that sense of trust. So there is that sense of safety with our partners. And that's just something that I really want to highlight as well in terms of what you said around the wounding that's present.
Yeah. And then I think if we just cut straight to the sexuality piece, then it's also understanding the different sexual temperaments between men and women. And men just have more fire that is like on. Whereas women, we're slow to simmer and then boil. And then if you look like at studies that they've done, women need a minimum of 20 to 30 minutes of foreplay without the genitals being touched. And that's also because then there's that safety of caressing and touching the whole body. And the reason, the medicine that is for both people is when we make love tantrically, we're doing exactly opposite from pornography, pretty much. We've still got that primal, and I love going into primal energy in the bedroom, but it's not the go-to. The go-to is to actually slow everything down and to sensitize the entire body. Our skin is our greatest sensory organ, and we focus everything on the genitals and the nipples. So when we talk about full body orgasms and multiple orgasms, it's because we spent time, first of all, connecting through non-genital touch through the whole body. And within that time, what we're doing is we're attuning our energetics to each other. And that's where sexual energy becomes a healing modality. And Mantak Chia's work is great about like how healthy it is for the body. But if you just think of it like this, that it's the energy that creates life on the planet. That's how fucking powerful it is. And so there's a reason that it's being like quieted and put away, because to be fully orgasmic, you're owning it all. It's like you're in your full expression and aliveness and feeling without resistance. And when you can do that and connect that to spirituality, this is the premise of Tantra, where relationships and sexuality are the fastest pathway to realization. And, you know, it's fun. I'd rather be doing that than sitting on a mountain meditating.
For sure. I just love as well the passion with which you shared all that, and was definitely smiling throughout the entire time. And I just noticed as well how my own sexual life has substantially changed since I've been exposed to these teachings, and really going beyond any form of agenda, any form of outcome, but really expanding sexuality just outside as well of a penetrative act, but rather having it be the entire experience, you know, just from that first gaze, from that first kiss, you know, from that first touch, and all of those things. So yeah, just really want to as well highlight to the value and of these teachings and what they really brought. So I want to slowly start wrapping up. I feel like time has just absolutely been flying. It's just been epic. But there's 2 questions that I'd have left for you. And I would also want to give you an opportunity just to share where people can find you. But ultimately, I would like to hear from you. What would you say you have learned through Tantra about men? So in maybe 1 to 2 minutes, what is it that you've discovered about, men, and ultimately how has your perspective changed?
What I've learned is that men want to make their partner happy. Men love for us to be happy and joyful. And I think we forget that as women sometimes. And we assume that they know what we need, right? Which is ludicrous. And that's how I was in my, previous relationships pre-Tantra. And that actually they like to know what we like as well, in the bedroom, out of the bedroom, so they're not guessing.
We need the fucking guidance.
You need the fucking, and we're the ever-changing feminine. So some days it's like, oh, I really need just for you to spend a whole hour on my body. Totally. And then other times it's like, oh, I want it now. So the ever-changing feminine needs to know also that we get to express that, but it's how we express it. And this is what I've learned with men as well, is that when we express what we do want and what we're desiring, rather than focusing on what we don't want, then men are motivated, of course, because they're inspired by what we're saying, rather than shutting down by shaming, saying this isn't working, that isn't working. So this is what I love about men, and I think there's so much conditioning around, that as women we have around men that we've taken on from our mothers as well. That's just not fair and not true with the men that we're interacting with in this life.
I appreciate all that, and I think it's very touching to hear that, and I believe the male listeners here as well will just deeply appreciate just these words of love and appreciation for them. So thank you for that. Tara, where can our listeners find you?
Embodied Awakening Academy. Yeah, we have a website, we have an Instagram page. I have my own Instagram page, Tara Meegan with a double E.
Any events, anything that you want to bring our listeners an awareness to?
I mean, I'm teaching in Bali kind of every few months, teaching overseas. Raven's doing the same. We have an 8-day living Tantra retreat for those people who really want to master the human experience. We have an incredible online library of courses. We have practitioner trainings for people who want to train to share this work. So have a peruse and see if anything stands out.
For sure. And I can just attest to the teachings. I mean, I have been involved with the Academy for 2 years and have had the great honor and, thanks to you as well, that you've really taken me on board to assist, to support, to as well have the opportunity to participate and to learn. And it's fundamentally changed my life and you've supported me in that. So I just really want to thank you. Thanks, Sarah. I love you too. All right. Well, the place where I would like us just to close off is I would like to offer the space for a final message that you would like to provide. And I'm curious to hear, among the female clients that you have and the things that they communicate about their relationships and the desires that they have, I would love to provide the stage for you just to share one message of on behalf of, let's say, the women that you've been exposed to and worked with in terms of what it is that they desire from us as men.
Yeah. I mean, we just love to be adored and cherished. And the love languages are a great kind of platform to use of, words of adoration, touch, quality time, gifts, and whatever that looks like. I can't remember the last one. But yeah, just to really love and adore. And it's really that goddess energy. Like, imagine if we see each other as gods and gods, we'd be like singing each other's praises all the time. So that done in a healthy way. Yeah. And I think the other piece is, we love when our whole bodies are connected to sexually, and there's a deep intimacy of the heart space to really connect at levels physically, emotionally, and spiritually together.
Tara, Meegan, thank you for coming on.
Welcome. It's been a privilege.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening here I hope you got a lot of value out of this conversation. And in case you want to share any insights or questions, feel free to reach out to both of us. In case you want to tag anything about this exact podcast, feel free to do that. And make sure as well to mention our names. And until next time, signing off. Thank you for listening to this episode. Your time and attention is truly appreciated. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for my upcoming episodes. And in case you know somebody who would find this episode helpful, I encourage you to pay it forward. Finally, if you've personally been receiving value from the show, one way you're able to support this podcast is by leaving a 5-star rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Not only does this help more people find the show, but it also supports me in bringing more incredible guests on for the future. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and until next time, signing off.